Good morning.
Good morning, Mary.
After a long week of rain and humidity, we're treated to sunshine and dry air. And that mirrors our topic this morning, long years of messages to the contrary, and now a focus on our inherent holiness. Our inherent holiness. Let the sun shine on our souls. I'm honored to share this panel with Emily Cohen, my former colleague at Water, and soon to be my sister alum of Harvard Divinity School. Emily works for the Faith Trust Institute, which is the go-to place on the prevention of sexual and domestic violence. She works with Marie Fortune, who many of you know by reputation, and has done tremendous work there for the last 3 years. After her internship in Washington, she was part of the Loretto program, as is Kathy Jaski, and they are, in my view, some of the most amazing women and men. There are a couple of men in the program too, but the women especially are quite amazing. And as we see them move on in their careers, it's really exciting to see how experiences like this and time together at Water and Women's Ordination Conference and New Ways and other places where they work, how they take those experiences and become the new leaders of our movements and of these organizations. And it's great to have Deb here. When I was thinking about this, I thought to myself, if someone says holy to me, it's Deb. Yeah, I thought about that all on my own. All of us have heard, have you ever heard this holy, holy, holy? Where'd you hear it?
Right here.
Yeah, but before you got here. In church, the Mass. Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts.
Heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna in the highest.
Blessed is the one who comes
in the name of our God.
Hosanna in the highest. Now, little known fact, the first part of that, the holy, 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 is the hymn of the seraphim. Remember those six-winged creatures from Isaiah 6:3 and Revelations 4:8? No, nobody here remembers those, but they are, Isaiah 6:3 and Revelations 4:8. The second part, blessed is the one who comes in the name of our God, is from Matthew 21:9. And it was the alleged cheer of the crowd as Jesus entered Jerusalem. Okay, just to kind of situate this a little bit in the historical context out of which we come. But did we ever stop to think that this meant us? I think that's really the question on the table today. That holiness is not confined to Jesus or to anyone else, but is in fact, in my view, a characteristic of creation. Holiness is a characteristic of creation. That's my take on it, which I share for your consideration this morning. You may or may not end up agreeing with me, but that's for discussion. We say we are holy, H-O-L-Y, holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, holy, H-O-L-Y, and I would argue that unlike that part of the Mass, we spell it right. There are reasons why we as women, and especially as lesbian, queer women and our friends, have not focused on holiness much of our lives. Principal among them, in my view, is the fact that much of Western spirituality is rooted deeply in dualisms, where one member of the pair is good and the other one not so much. Think light and darkness. Think light and darkness. Think God, humanity. Think men and women. Think white and black. Think heterosexual and LGBTIQ. Think rich and poor. So in turn, holiness gets paired with sinfulness. And guess which side most of us are on? As women, we are seen as less than men. As lesbian queer women, we're seen as outside the pale of normative womanhood. As progressive, feminist, womanist people who are open to many and varied religious expressions beyond the Christian one, we get constant messages that we are not holy. Or to put it another way, when was the last time somebody said to you, hey Jane, you're so holy? Or, Anne, I've never met anyone quite as holy as you. Not recently, I don't think. Once this mode of dualistic thinking is firmly entrenched, certain exceptions are made. That's how the system works. Certain exceptions are made. Certain saints, you see the holy side, are proclaimed, and they become the models for how we get from one side of the dualism to the other. For example, a woman saint like Maria Goretti, do you remember her?
Yes.
Is lifted up to show a route to holiness. Her story in a nutshell, in case you missed her in grade school. Young, late 19th century Italian girl, sexually harassed by a young man who eventually stabbed her to death instead of raping her. She forgave him on her deathbed. He served a few years in prison, then persuaded someone that he was extremely sorry. She was named a saint, virgin and martyr, of course, because she had resisted his efforts, and he was set free. What is wrong with this picture? Virtually everything. Dead, abused woman, freed man, sexual abuse, virginity prized over life itself. No wonder most of us don't think of ourselves as holy. How grim is that? There are similar stories. For example, 3rd century St. Lucy, remember her? Who was said to have plucked out her beautiful eyes that a suitor had admired rather than encourage his advances. Another case of blaming the victim. Another blaming the victim. There are women like Gianna Beretta Molla, a 20th century woman who refused both a medically indicated abortion and a medically indicated hysterectomy, dying instead of sepsis after the birth of her 4th child. With such role models, frankly, I ask you, who wants to be holy? It's a serious question. Would you want, is that what we want? I think these examples emerge from a flawed sense of how the world works. And women are always on the losing side of that binary. Dualisms are so limited in usefulness when one has the whole canvas of creation on which to paint a life. Why restrict ourselves to one side or the other? And dualisms are so damaging, especially to people like us, who always end up on the short end of the stick. Whether because of our race, our sexual orientation, our gender identity, our gender, our social location, we always end up on the short end of the stick. I believe that having such role models as some of those can be dangerous to every woman's spiritual health. So our task this weekend, I think, is to replace those images with so many others that highlight the holiness of each and every one of us. Indeed, that highlight the holiness of creation. That those abused, mistreated, and sometimes murdered women remain in our prayers, but fade from our memories like a 3rd grade spelling test when it comes to what's holy. They are only holy if you accept the way the world is set up by those who do not have our well-being in mind. Now, there's a lot of lip service in contemporary Catholicism. Indeed, it's echoed in other religious traditions as well, of this universal call to holiness. The Second Vatican II document, Lumen Gentium, that some of you will remember, the dogmatic constitution on the church, written in 1964, deals with this question extensively. But unfortunately, the concept is mired in nuptial imagery, Jesus and his bride, the church, riddled with offensive nonsense about the hierarchy and the rest of us, quote, who are being cared for by them. You see, so the dualism, even in the universal call for holiness, is that the hierarchy cares for us. Deb, you, McGann, care for you. With such language, it's clear that the universal call for holiness, as currently understood, is popular among conservative Catholics. In fact, Opus Dei has particular affection for the universal call for holiness, and others of us have tended to ignore it. Well, I'm not so willing to hand over the jewels. I think that there is, in fact, a universal call for holiness. So I scrounge around to find something in the tradition to connect with, because I think we're part of that community, and then I think we can improve upon it. So that's what I try to do. I scrounge in the tradition to find a little something, and then I say, wait, it's a living tradition, we're going to improve on it. So I found one good, strong statement in Lumen Gentium, and it does have a rather Christian tint, so I'm going to just leave that out because I think it goes beyond those who are Christian. The statement is this: all the faithful of whatever rank or status are called to the fullness of life and to the perfection of charity. By this holiness, a more human manner of living is promoted in this earthly society. That's from chapter 5, paragraph 40, if anybody's looking. This is a start, but a small and slow start, and I think as women we should not settle for crumbs, intellectual or spiritual. In other words, we can do better. And we can do much better if women who come after us are to appreciate their own holiness. We must do better. Indeed, if women who predecease us are to die with peace of mind, we must do better. So let me jumpstart this concept. I'm going to jumpstart this with some new ways of thinking about holiness. Negative messages get stuck in the hard drives of our souls. You can take it to the bank. Negative messages get stuck in the hard drives of our souls. So let's start replacing them. That's why we've been saying, you're holy, I'm holy, it's holy, she's holy, they're holy. That's why we've been saying it over and over again. Because negative messages get stuck in the hard drives of our souls. So let's replace them with symbols and images that will convey holiness in a new way, turning the old ideas on their head. I have 3 ways to do that. One is shifting holiness from something that's scarce, that only a few people have, to something that's absolutely plentiful and abundant. Second, I suggest we name and claim concrete examples of holiness walking down the street. And third, I think we spread the word to others that they too are holy, because holiness is part of being created. It's not something special, it's part of being created. Let me offer a few clues on how to do each of these 3 things, and then Emily and Deb will pick up from there. The first move is to think about holiness as an inherent part of creation. Recall that passage from Genesis 1:13. God saw all that God had made, and behold, it was very good. Let me read it again. God saw all that God made, and behold, it was very good. While Scripture, I don't believe, has the last word theologically, I think we do, I think it's an important affirmation that has been lost in the shuffle. Nothing is left out of what is good. Not women, not lesbians, not queer people, not young people, not people with disabilities. Everything is good in divine sight. And that's what we mean by holiness. The goodness of creation, not because of what we do or what we think, but because we are. I believe we do not choose holiness, it chooses us at birth. We don't choose holiness, it chooses us. I think of this as wholesale, W-H-O-L-L-Y, wholesale or holy holiness, as equal opportunity holiness, something that accrues to us through no particular act of our own, but simply because creation is good. Of course, there are myriad ways in which much of what we experience is negative. Violence of all kinds, oppression, discrimination, rejection, marginalization. But these are human creations that can and must be changed. That's part of our work. I believe that holiness is divine, of God, something to enjoy along with the rest of creation. Otherwise, we operate out of a notion of scarcity. There's only a little bit of holiness, rather than out of plenty. Or we operate out of dualisms and binaries, not out of a holistic sense of the goodness of this great creation of which we're a part. Walk out these doors and tell me I'm wrong. A second move I think is helpful is to be very concrete about holiness. It's not an abstract way of thinking. Being very concrete is an antidote to a spiritualized notion of holiness, in which holiness is cloaked in mystery, held hostage by those who would turn their backs on some of our favorite examples of holy women. Most people I know, most people know me, know that I'm fairly critical, that I'm not given to a kind of hallmark, soft-touch, intergalactic spirituality. So if I'm seeing holiness, you can be sure that others have seen it long before I did. They got it. Now, we all have our own lists, and I would venture a couple of my favorite examples, just to give you a sense of who might be on your list. I start with Dorothy Day, whose quote was read. Patty, you read her quote this morning. She didn't want to be trivialized as a saint. But she was the founder of the Catholic worker movement. She was a mother, a woman who had an abortion. She was a tax resistor, spent time in jail. She struggled for women's suffrage as well as for justice for farm workers. Her name is really synonymous, in my view, with the word Catholic. When I think of Catholic, I think of Dorothy Day. That's my first association. Another person who's on my list is Teresa Kane. Some of you know Teresa Kane, Sister of Mercy, who welcomed the Pope on his first visit to the U.S., and he didn't get over it. grand sister of sisters, former president of the Sisters of Mercy, former president of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious. I even called Diane's cane Teresa Kane. I adore Teresa Kane. The woman who spoke truth to papal power, paid a price. Professor of Women's Studies, wise woman who keynoted the first Conference of Catholic Lesbians in 1982 at Kirkridge. Keynote speaker. She usually attends the Call to Action meeting in Chicago or wherever they have it, and she's been known to drink beer with the Loretto interns. Now that is a saint. And my third, I'm just giving you examples. There are a gazillion of them. My third is Carol Costin, who was the founding director of Network. Many of you know Network as the Nuns on the Bus, but in fact Network was founded long before any nun went on any bus, and Carol Costin was the founding director. She was recognized by President Bill Clinton with the Presidential Citizens Medal, and I'm just going to read the citation because I think it captures the sainthood of Carol Costin. Let's see. A tireless advocate for the poor and oppressed, Sister Carol Costin has worked with faith and vision to shape public policy that reflects Catholic values, Christian values, from promoting human rights and social justice to helping bring economic development to low-income areas. Carol Costin has used her creative leadership and moral compass to build a more just society in America and around the world. Now, I saw Dorothy Day with my own eyes when she got the Isaac Hecker Prize in Boston at the Paula Center in the 1970s. And yes, I was awestruck. Dorothy Day walking down the street. There she was. Sitting in the back pew when they called her. She had to go all the way up the center aisle because she'd been sitting in the back. You're supposed to sit up in the front. Teresa Kane responded to a panel I was on one time, telling that she told the audience that water was a form of women's community before I realized that it had anything to do with women's community. I thought it was just where I worked. And Carol Costin and I have shared office space at Water. We love to swim together. We love to cook together. We love a glass of wine together. These are real women, flesh and blood, not plastic statues with painted faces. None of them are perfect, but just as we are not perfect, they are holy. Got it? Got it? I think that's the essence of it. Did you get it? Did you get it? Somebody over here got it? Other saints for me that I have not met or touched or enjoyed in person, but whose holiness informs my own, include Judge Sonia Sotomayor. I mean, I wish she were here. Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. Okay? Tennis great Martina Navratilova. Writer Susan Sontag. What about Julia Child, the great chef? These are lives that radiate holiness for me. They do things that I wish I could do. These are great people. And they radiate holiness, and I get something from their holiness. There are many others. You're going to have a chance in a little bit to name your favorites. But keep in mind two things about them. First, they walk down the street the way we do. They're friends, family, colleagues. And second, we are those people for others. Recognizing, naming, claiming our own holiness is the hardest part. Look around. Touch somebody holy. Touch somebody holy. Touch somebody. You can move if you want. Touch somebody. Touch somebody holy. No. Touch somebody holy. Touch somebody holy. Touch somebody holy. Touch somebody holy. You see, it's real. It's not like we're making it up. It's not like we're making it up.
I tasted salt.
Too much information. Okay, so first, my first suggestion is get away from the dualisms, get away from the abstraction. Second, see them walking down the street. And my third suggestion is start to tell people they're holy. This is not some feel-good exercise, but a very offensive way of countering the negative messages, of moving beyond those teeny little slivers of people who are holy, the abstract notion that, and I call it babble about people who are holy, and especially the notion that women and women who love women and women who love themselves are not holy, will never qualify, Once we begin to unmask the holiness for what it is, as it has been taught to us, namely to see it as the deepest reason for our being created, that which makes the divine most delighted, she's most delighted in our holiness, then we can share the idea with the world. By so doing, all who have been excluded, starting with children, people who are poor, women, people who are ill, incarcerated, in war zones, on drugs, all can begin to internalize the fact that they too are holy. It can't hurt, and I dare say it might help. I'm not suggesting that wholesale holiness is the cure for the common cold. But I do think that seeing holiness as plentiful, not scarce, naming concrete examples of holiness walking down the street, and telling people that they are holy so that they might in fact one day believe it, is in fact a recipe for helping us to lighten up and to light up the world. Let's try it here this weekend, and my bet is, by the end of our time together, the saints will come marching in. Thank you.